"When did you stop trying to save your sibling from your parents?" I used to whisper. "It's not normal. You know that, right?" She'd nod, cry, beg me not to leave her alone with them. But then one day I found out she told them everything I'd said, word for word. She wasn't trapped anymore. She chose them. And that's when I stopped trying to save her. I think the first time I really understood how deep it went. I was 15 and she was 17. We were sitting in the hallway upstairs. Lights off, door cracked, just listening to them fight downstairs like we always did. Except this time they weren't yelling at each other. They were yelling about us. Mom said I was turning into a manipulator. Dad said I was filling her head with things she didn't need to hear. I looked at my sister hoping she'd be scared with me. But she just sat there quietly, eyes wide, not blinking. "We'll be okay," she whispered. But I didn't believe it, and maybe she didn't either. The thing is, I don't think they ever hit us in a way that left marks. That's what makes this story so easy to ignore. No bruises, no broken bones, just words and silence and pressure that made you feel like breathing wrong would ruin Christmas. My sister Haley was always the good one. She got straight A's, helped Mom cook, always said thank you. She played their game perfectly. Me, I was the one who asked questions. Why does Dad never let us shut the door? Why does Mom cry in the laundry room every Tuesday? Why can't we tell anyone what happened that night at the cabin? I wasn't rebellious, I was just awake. Haley wasn't dumb. I know that for a fact. She saw everything I saw. She'd look at me sometimes with this haunted expression, like she wanted to say something but didn't know how. And I'd try to give her words. I'd say, "It's okay to feel weird about this. It's okay to want to leave." She'd cry, hug me, thank me. Then the next day, she'd go back to helping Mom clean out the car at midnight just because it needed it. I think that's the most dangerous kind of brainwashing, the kind where they don't have to force you anymore. You just start doing it yourself. By the time she graduated, she was already halfway gone. She stopped confiding in me, started defending them more. And then there was the day I came home from school and found my journal on the kitchen table, open, pages marked, words highlighted. I froze. I'd written things in there, real things, memories, stuff I'd never said out loud, and I knew Haley had read it. I confronted her later, and she didn't even try to lie, just stared at me and said, "You don't understand what you're doing. You're going to ruin everything." I think part of me still wanted to believe she was scared, that she'd been pressured, but then I heard her say it, not to me, to them. I was coming downstairs for water late one night and heard her in the living room, telling them everything I'd said in private. "He thinks you're hiding something. He said you looked nervous when the police came last year." He wrote about the cabin again, word for word. Their silence after that was worse than yelling. It was heavy, focused, like they were planning something. I backed away before they saw me, and I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep much after that. From then on I kept everything in my head. No more journals, no more whispering, and definitely no more trying to save someone who'd already picked a side. They treated her like a princess after that. More freedom, more praise, even a car. Meanwhile, I got grounded for being antisocial and not helping around the house. I didn't say a word, just watched. And when Haley moved out a year later, she hugged me and said, "You'll understand someday. They're not perfect, but they love us." That was the last time I saw her in person. She stopped replying to my texts after college, blocked me eventually. I kept hoping she'd call, say she was sorry, say she finally understood. But that call never came. Then 3 years ago I got an email from an old neighbor. She'd run into Haley at a conference in Portland, said she looked well, confident. Said Haley had mentioned me, said I was troubled, said she hoped I'd finally grown up. I didn't respond. I just stared at the screen and felt something shift. Not sadness, not anger, just this quiet, hollow clarity. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was part of it. She'd made her choice, and that's when I knew I had to make mine. So I stopped checking her social media. I stopped asking about her when distant relatives called. I stopped defending her in my own head every time I thought maybe she didn't mean it, because she did. I started focusing on my own life, therapy, new friends, job. I moved to a different city, didn't tell anyone the address. It was quiet, peaceful even. Until last year when I got a message from a number I didn't recognize, no name. Just, "Do you remember what happened that night at the cabin?" My stomach dropped. It was the kind of sentence that lives in your spine, not your mind. I didn't respond, not right away. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours. Then I typed, "Who is this?" No reply. Just 3 dots for a moment, then nothing. I tried calling, straight to voicemail. I didn't sleep again that night. Not because I was afraid of what the message meant, but because it meant someone else remembered. I'd always assumed they'd buried it completely. Made Haley forget, made me doubt. But that one sentence cracked something open. I went back through everything, my old notebooks, school files, even that journal they'd read years ago, which I'd secretly kept hidden at the bottom of a taped-up moving box. I found something I'd drawn when I was 13. A sketch of the cabin done in ballpoint pen, windows, trees, the weird shed behind it, and inside the shed I'd drawn something. A hatch. I stared at that part for hours. I had no memory of a hatch, none, but it was there in the drawing, labeled in my handwriting, "Do not open." My hands were shaking. That same week I started making calls, tried to find records of the cabin. My parents had sold it years ago, apparently right after Haley moved out. No paper trail in our name anymore. I called the county office, pretended to be a student doing research, asked if the land had any construction permits or utility reports. The woman on the phone paused for a long time before saying, "That property, it's been marked as restricted since 2003, no explanation on file." I asked who had marked it. She didn't know. I asked who owned it now. "Private trust," she said. No name listed. My heart was pounding. I didn't know what I was chasing, but I knew I wasn't making it up. I thought about calling Haley, just once, just to say, "Tell me the truth," but what would she say? That I was paranoid, that I always made up stories, that I was the one who needed help? I'd heard it all before. And now I wasn't even sure if she'd pick up. So I did something stupid. I drove there. Alone. I hadn't seen the cabin since I was 10, maybe 11. The road was overgrown, the gate rusted and half collapsed. No one had lived there in years by the look of it. I parked a few 100 feet away and walked the rest. Every step felt wrong, like I was moving backward through time. The trees were taller than I remembered. The porch sagged under my weight, but the door opened easily. Inside was dust, mold, a few old chairs, and that smell I can't describe but recognized immediately, like wet wood and silence. I didn't stay long. Just enough to confirm what I remembered. The living room with the ugly green couch, the painting of the mountain above the fireplace, the cracked window that never closed properly, and the door to the back shed. It was still there, same padlock, same warped wood. I thought about breaking it. I had a crowbar in my trunk, but something stopped me. A voice in my head, clear and cold, "Do not open." Instead I took pictures, every angle, every corner, left quickly. Drove 5 hours without stopping. When I got home, I didn't tell anyone where I'd been. Just uploaded the photos to a private folder and went to bed. A few days later, I got another text, same number. "They said you wouldn't go back. I knew you would." My blood ran cold. This time I didn't reply at all. I just watched the typing bubble come and go, over and over. Like whoever it was didn't know what to say next. Eventually, they sent one last message, "Don't look for me." That's when I knew. It was Haley. She was the only person who would have known I went, the only one who would remember that specific night, the only one who could say it like that. But why tell me not to look? What had she done, or seen, or learned that made her want to bury it again? Part of me thinks she regrets choosing them. Part of me thinks she's just trying to scare me off. But either way, I know now that the story didn't end when I walked away from them. It's still alive, still growing, and maybe it always will be. I haven't gone back to the cabin. I haven't tried to trace the number again. Some nights I stare at that photo of the shed and wonder what's underneath. A trapdoor, old evidence, something worse, but I never open the file. I just sit there waiting for the next message. Or maybe hoping it never comes. Because deep down I think I already know the answer. And I'm not sure I want to hear her say it. The strangest part wasn't the cabin or the texts, it was what started happening after. Little things, subtle, like getting a call from my bank about a flagged transaction I never made. Or the time I came home and found my apartment door closed but unlocked. Even though I always double-check it, I chalked it up to stress. Maybe I was spiraling. Maybe the memories were messing with me more than I realized. But then one afternoon I checked my mailbox and found an envelope. No return address. Inside was a single printed photo. A picture of me, standing in front of the cabin, looking up at the shed. Someone had been there. Someone had followed me. My hands shook. I flipped the photo over. Just one line on the back typed, "You were never supposed to go back." That night I didn't sleep. I stayed up rereading old emails, texts, everything I'd tried to forget. I pulled out a thumb drive I hadn't touched in years and opened a folder titled "For Later." Inside were scans of my high school therapist notes. I'd requested them years ago after a paranoid breakdown during college. One note stood out. It was from a session Haley and I had both attended when we were 16. She'd told the therapist that I invented stories and got obsessed with trying to prove things that weren't real. I remember sitting there next to her, silent, while she smiled and played the victim. I hadn't spoken for the rest of that session. She'd hijacked it, turned it into evidence, and the therapist had believed her. No wonder I'd stopped going, but there was one part of the notes I hadn't seen before. Maybe I missed it or maybe I didn't want to see it. It said, "Client expressed fear that sibling was repeating things at home. Possibly being coached. Sister denies any such behavior. Will monitor." That line haunted me. coached? What if it hadn't been Haley's idea to sell me out? What if they'd trained her to do it, rewarded her for loyalty, made her feel powerful for keeping me in check? I started remembering other things then. Holidays where I'd get in trouble for things I never said. Times I'd be punished and she'd mysteriously get a new phone or dress. I thought it was favoritism. Now I wondered if it was compensation. I couldn't let it go. I started digging into our family history. Property records, police reports, anything public. My dad had a sealed court record from 1996. I only found it because I searched his name with every county we'd ever lived in. The document title was vague, something about domestic disturbance and minor involved. I couldn't access the full file without a lawyer. But the date matched the week we left our old house in Arizona and never talked about it again. I tried asking my mom once, years ago. She just said we moved for a job opportunity and told me to stop asking questions. I remember the look on Haley's face when I brought it up that night. She stared at me like I'd spit on the dinner table. "Let it go," she said, but I couldn't, still can't. That record meant something. It was the first crack in their version of the story. And it made me wonder how much of our childhood was built on things no one was allowed to say out loud. One day I got an email from someone I didn't know. No subject. Just a line in the body: "You should ask about the shed before it's too late." I replied instantly. "Who is this?" No response. I traced the IP. It was masked through 3 proxies, routed out of state. I knew enough to stop there. I was out of my depth. But now the paranoia was growing. Was someone trying to help or threaten me? Was it Haley? Someone she knew, someone they all knew? That week I bought a cheap burner phone and started making notes in there instead of on my laptop. I didn't trust my computer anymore. I started checking locks twice, setting up a cheap camera by the front door. And still I felt watched, like someone was always 2 steps ahead. I started dreaming of the shed. In the dreams it was open, but I never saw what was inside. I'd just stand there, frozen, as something hummed beneath the floor. Not a monster, not a ghost, just a feeling, like something had been buried for so long it forgot how to stay quiet. I started calling old family friends, people I hadn't spoken to in years. Most of them were polite but vague. Some hung up the second I asked about the cabin. Others said they didn't remember that place, or thought we only went once or twice. That was a lie. We went every summer from when I was 5 until I turned 11. I remembered the patterns on the wallpaper, the exact squeak the floor made by the bathroom, the tree stump out back that Dad used to split firewood. One woman, Mrs. Clayton, who lived across the lake back then, sounded surprised to hear my voice. She said, "I always wondered what happened to you kids. You just stopped coming one year. Your sister was so polite." I remember she used to sit on the dock and talk to herself for hours. That stopped me. "Talk to herself?" I asked. "Oh sure. I thought maybe it was imaginary friends or something." She'd sit cross-legged and whisper. I only ever saw her alone. It gave me the creeps, to be honest. I asked if she ever heard what Haley was saying. She hesitated. One time she said, I was close enough to hear her saying, "I didn't mean to, please don't tell him," over and over. She must have been 10. My spine stiffened. That would have been the summer before we stopped going. I thanked her and hung up. I didn't know what to do with that. What could a 10-year-old be so afraid of that she whispered confessions to no one on a dock? And more importantly, what was she afraid someone would tell him? I knew who him was. There was only one him in our family that everyone was afraid of, but no one ever said it out loud. My father. I started to wonder if maybe Haley had never chosen them at all. Maybe she'd been chosen, groomed, molded. She wasn't strong like I was. That's what I used to think. But maybe she was just smart. Smart enough to know that if you don't align with the people in power in a house like ours, you don't survive. But then again, if she was really protecting herself, why throw me under the bus? Why keep feeding them my secrets, unless that was survival for her? One night I couldn't sleep, so I started listening to old voicemails I'd saved. Most were from college, short ones, but one stood out. It was from my mom. During the year Haley and I stopped speaking, she sounded off. Her voice was soft, too calm. "Your sister says you've been asking strange questions," she said. "I hope you're not getting stuck in those old thoughts again. They're dangerous for everyone." Then a pause. "Let the past go. It's not healthy." I must have listened to that message 10 times. I didn't remember hearing it before. I checked the date, 2 days after I visited the cabin alone, which meant Haley told them I'd gone. I deleted the voicemail. Not out of fear, but because I didn't want it in my phone anymore. That kind of poison spreads. Still, I couldn't stop piecing things together. I found an old yearbook from 5th grade and flipped through it late one night. Haley had signed the back cover. "Don't forget what we buried." That's what she wrote. At the time I thought she meant our time capsule. But we never buried a time capsule. I even asked her back then. She told me I was imagining things. But if I was, why would she write that? I started going back through everything with new eyes. Photos from the cabin, videos. One tape, labeled Summer 2002, showed us roasting marshmallows in the fire pit. We're both smiling, but Haley keeps glancing at the woods, nervous. Half a second of something behind her, a shadow, a trick of the light. I paused the frame, enlarged it. Couldn't tell, but her face in that moment, it wasn't a child having fun, it was a child watching the door. That's when I started remembering what she used to say in her sleep. We shared a room most of childhood. She'd whisper sometimes, cry out. One phrase came up more than once. I didn't lock it. I didn't lock it. I thought it was just a nightmare. Now I wasn't so sure. What didn't she lock? The shed, the hatch I drew and forgot. The more I looked, the more holes I found in my own memories. Whole weekends I couldn't place, moments that felt stitched together wrong. A school field trip I swore happened in 4th grade, but the yearbook said 3rd. Photos I remembered taking that weren't on any hard drives. Like someone had gone back and pruned the timeline. One night I called a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years, Ashley. She used to come with us to the cabin sometimes. I asked if she remembered anything strange. She went quiet, then said, "You don't really want to know." I told her I did. She sighed. "That place. Your dad used to tell us not to go behind the shed, said there were snakes. But one time I saw him come out of there with a shovel. Late at night, I watched through the upstairs window. I asked what he was doing. She said, "I don't know," but I told Haley and she made me swear not to say anything. Said he'd get mad. She looked terrified. I thought she was just being dramatic. My breath caught. "Did you ever see him bury anything?" I asked. Ashley paused. "Not directly, but I saw fresh dirt the next morning, and a burned trash pile behind the shed that wasn't there the day before." I asked if she'd ever told anyone. She said, "No. We don't talk about your dad. My mom always said it was safer not to." That call ended with her telling me not to bring it up again. "People like your dad," she said, "they don't forget, even after all these years." I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid of my dad suddenly showing up. He lived halfway across the country now, and we hadn't spoken in years, but because something finally clicked. All the avoidance, the silence, the careful way people said his name or didn't say it at all. It wasn't about respect. It was fear. And it wasn't just me who'd felt it. My whole extended family had built themselves around the same unspoken rule. Don't provoke him. Don't remember too much. Don't ask questions. That realization cracked something open in me. I'd always believed the dysfunction was personal, just between me and Haley or me and my parents, but it wasn't. It was systemic, quiet, generational, and Haley had learned the rules better than I ever could. That's why she survived. That's why she thrived. I started researching behavioral conditioning. Not for school or anything. I just needed to understand how people could be taught without realizing to defend the very systems that hurt them, and more importantly, how they could be rewarded for betraying the people trying to pull them out. Haley wasn't evil, I know that, but she became dangerous the moment she decided safety mattered more than truth. That's the part that still breaks me. I tried to go on with my life. For a while I even did. Got promoted, started dating someone, kept my head down. But that shadow never left. Every time the phone rang, every time I saw a black SUV on my street, a small part of me expected it, expected him, expected some final move, some confirmation that all of this wasn't just paranoia. But nothing ever happened. Silence for over a year. Until the email. It came from a Gmail address with a name I didn't recognize. The subject line just said, "What she didn't tell you." The body of the message was a paragraph, plain text. "She thought she was protecting you. She thought if she told them what you wrote, they'd leave you alone. She didn't know they were already watching you. You shouldn't have gone back to the cabin." I read it 6 times. It didn't say who it was from, didn't sign off, but the way it was written, it sounded like someone who knew her. Not just surface-level knowledge, deep old knowledge, the kind you only get by being in the house at the dinners, near the door when it slams shut and everyone pretends it didn't. I tried to reply, but the account was already deleted. I checked the headers. The IP was masked again. The timing, 1 week after my dad posted a picture on Facebook from a small lakeside trip. Different cabin, different state. But the caption, "Some places just bring it all back," with a smirk emoji. He never used emojis. I stared at that post for an hour. Something about it felt deliberate, like it was meant for me. Like he was letting me know he knew. The part one can't explain is how my body reacted. I wasn't just tense. I was shaking, cold, like something primal had kicked in. Something that said, "You are not safe." I logged out, deleted the app, packed a bag. I spent the next 3 nights in a motel 2 cities over with my phone on airplane mode and the curtains drawn. Nobody came, nothing happened. But when I returned to my apartment, the fire alarm was unscrewed. just enough to be noticeable, just enough to say we could, not we did, just we could. I stood in that room for 30 minutes not touching anything. Then I reset the alarm, changed the locks and started making plans. I moved 2 months later, different city, changed my name on everything but my legal ID, only told 3 people, left no forwarding address. That was 9 months ago. I've been quiet since, careful. The emails stopped, no messages, no packages. For a while I let myself believe maybe it was over. Maybe he got bored. Maybe she, Haley, convinced him I wasn't a threat anymore. But I don't think that's what happened. I think he's waiting, watching. And I think she is too, because 3 days ago I got a letter in the mail, handwritten, no return address, just my name, my real name on the front. Inside was a sheet of paper folded once. It said, "Stop digging. There's nothing left to find," no punctuation, no signature, but the handwriting, it was hers, Haley's. I'd recognize it anywhere. I held the letter for a long time, studied every inch of it, the curve of her handwriting, the slight smudge on the lower edge, like she'd hesitated or her hand had trembled. There was no mistaking it, it was hers, and despite everything, despite all the years, all the silence, all the betrayals, a small part of me still wanted to believe it meant something, that maybe, buried under all the damage, she was reaching out, warning me, protecting me in the only way she could. But then I remembered the journal, the phone calls, the therapy session, the look in her eyes when she told them everything I'd said, word for word, no hesitation. I folded the letter back up and put it in a drawer, not to forget it, but to remember, to remind myself of the line that had been drawn long ago, whether I wanted to admit it or not. She wasn't warning me. She was telling me to stop before I got too close to whatever truth they were still trying to bury. I didn't stop. I couldn't. That night I drove to the last place I hadn't dared return to, my parents' old house. They sold it a while back, but I knew the neighborhood, knew the way the street lights always flickered at the corner, the crack in the sidewalk in front of the hedge, the way the porch creaked on the 3rd step. I parked down the block and walked. It was raining, a slow, heavy drizzle that soaked everything without making a sound. The house looked the same, different paint, a new car in the driveway, but the bones were still there. I didn't go up to the door. I just stood on the opposite sidewalk and stared, trying to remember which windows were mine, which room was hers, which night it was when I first knew something was deeply wrong and never said a word. I stayed for maybe 10 minutes, then turned and walked away. I don't know what I expected to find. Closure, answers, maybe just proof that the place still existed, that it hadn't been swallowed whole by all the things we never said. Back home I took out the photo of the cabin again, the one I'd taken when I went back. I zoomed in on the shed, on the shadows behind it, and that's when I noticed something I'd missed before. A strip of duct tape, weathered and barely visible, stuck to the side of the shed near the base, faded marker across it, H1J. My breath caught. H1. That was what my dad used to call Haley when he was joking around. H1 and H2, he'd say. Version 1 and version 2, I was H2. Always the second, always the echo. I started Googling H1J, nothing relevant at first. But after hours of rabbit holes and message boards I stumbled on something. An old scanned manual from the 90s for a system used in cold storage facilities. H1J wasn't a code for a person, it was a panel label. Hatch 1, junction. Emergency access. My heart was racing. The hatch I drew in my journal, the one I had no memory of. I didn't make it up. There was something there, something mechanical, functional, hidden. I thought about going back, to the cabin, to the shed, but this time, I wouldn't be alone. I reached out to the only person who ever believed me, even a little, my old roommate from college, Wes. He was the kind of guy who didn't flinch when things got weird. Former Army brat, quiet, observant. He owed me a favor. I called him and said, I need help. I'm not crazy, but I think something happened to me, to my family. And I can't be the only one who remembers. He didn't ask questions, just said, send me the address. We met 2 days later outside the cabin. It was colder this time. The trees were bare, the ground frozen. Wes had brought tools, crowbar, flashlight, gloves, and something I didn't ask about but looked like a sidearm. We didn't talk much, just moved, focused. The lock on the shed snapped easier than I thought it would. Inside it was empty, dust, old shelves, a broken rake. But then we found it under a plywood board, nailed into the floor. The hatch, metal, circular, bolted shut. The label barely visible beneath grime and rust. H1J. Wes looked at me. You sure about this? I nodded. I've never been more sure. We worked for nearly an hour before the bolts gave. When the hatch finally opened, the smell hit us. Not death, not rot, but old air, cold, stale, untouched. A metal ladder descended into darkness. Wes went first. I followed. 10 feet down, then a small tunnel, maybe 4 feet tall, carved into concrete. At the end, a room, bare, concrete walls, a single rusted chair bolted to the floor, a camera mount in the corner. Long empty. and on the wall, scratched in with something sharp, I said, "I'm sorry." I stared at it for a long time. My chest felt tight. "This," I whispered. Wes just nodded. "This was used for something." I didn't need to say it. We both felt it. The room didn't feel like a place where something bad might have happened. It felt like a place where something bad always happened. We didn't find tapes or documents, no bodies, just that chair and the message. We didn't talk on the drive back. Wes dropped me off and said, "Burn that letter she sent you, and don't go back there." I didn't, but I didn't burn the letter either. I kept it folded, hidden, because now I knew it wasn't a warning. It was a confession, a surrender. Haley knew what that place was, what had happened, and she'd been trying to live with it all these years, just like me. Only difference, she decided the only way to survive it was to become part of it. I kept thinking I'd feel something once I saw it with my own eyes. The hatch, the chair, the scratch on the wall. I thought maybe there'd be a moment of release, of clarity, like all the years of paranoia and whispers would finally make sense. But it didn't feel like that. It felt quiet, empty, like finding a locked box, opening it, and seeing it was already looted long before you ever got there. The real damage wasn't in that shed. It was in the space between memory and silence. All the things we knew but weren't allowed to say, all the questions we buried because there was never a safe place to ask them. I started having dreams again. Not nightmares, more like disjointed moments, standing in the hallway of our old house while Haley cried in the bathroom. Sitting in the back seat during a late-night drive, headlights sweeping over trees while our parents argued in whispers. One dream kept coming back. I was standing at the edge of the lake by the cabin, the water black and still, and Haley was standing waist-deep in the middle, facing away from me. I kept calling to her, but she wouldn't turn around. And just before I woke up, she said, "You weren't supposed to see that." Over and over. Same tone, flat, like a recording. I started journaling again, carefully, offline. I'd write at night after locking every door, unplugging everything with a camera, turning off the lights. Part of me knew it didn't matter. If they were still watching, they'd always find a way. But it helped me think, helped me process. And slowly I started trying to trace the few other people who had ever been near that place. I didn't want revenge. I didn't even want justice. I just wanted confirmation. Proof that I wasn't the only one still haunted by what we grew up in. I reached out to a guy named Mark who lived 2 cabins down from us back in the early 2000s. Found him through an old boating forum. He was in his late 50s now, lived alone, had a boat repair business in Michigan. I messaged him casually at first, just said I was looking for people who remembered the lake during those summers. He responded a few days later, polite but distant. Said he remembered the family with the 2 quiet kids. Said he remembered Haley being polite. Said I used to keep to myself. Then he added something I didn't expect. "I always wondered about that time the police came to your cabin. Summer of '03, I think. There were lights flashing. Your dad came by the next day to say it was a misunderstanding." My blood turned cold. "Police? I don't remember that. Not at all." I asked him if he was sure. He said yes. 2 cars. Middle of the night. I was out fishing, thought someone got hurt. But then it was quiet again. Next day, everyone acted like nothing happened. I thanked him, and we didn't talk again. But that single memory, not mine, his, confirmed something huge. Something did happen that night. Something big enough to involve cops. Something big enough to be covered up. And I have zero memory of it. I thought about asking Haley. I really did. Thought about sending a message, something neutral, non-confrontational. Just, "Do you remember when the police came to the cabin?" But I didn't, because if she knew and chose to stay silent, then I was just giving her one more chance to lie to my face. And if she didn't know or had forgotten, then maybe she was more broken than I ever imagined. Either way, it wouldn't help. So I stayed quiet, waited, until something else came to me. Not from Haley, not from Wes, from someone I hadn't thought about in over 15 years, Mr. Langston, our old science teacher. He wasn't just any teacher. He used to run a summer discovery camp for kids, and one year, when Haley and I were maybe 10 and 12, he brought a small group of us out near the lake to do nature surveys and stargazing. I remembered thinking he was kind, patient, one of the few adults who didn't talk down to us. I found his name in a school archive and sent him a long email. Told him I remembered that summer. Told him I was doing a writing project and wanted to ask about some of the things we did at the lake. He responded 2 days later, warm, a little surprised I remembered him. Then, almost at the bottom of the email, he wrote, "You know, I've always remembered that day your sister ran back to camp alone. Said she saw something in the woods. She was shaking, wouldn't let go of my hand. I tried to ask what happened, but she kept saying, 'Don't tell him I saw it. Please don't tell him I saw.' I assumed it was just a deer or a shadow. Kids have wild imaginations. I didn't even finish reading the email before I felt the air leave my lungs. Because again, I had no memory of that. Nothing. Not her being scared, not her running, not even being part of that camp group at all. It was like those entire days were just wiped. And what chilled me wasn't that I forgot, it was that she remembered. And she lied about it every time we talked. Told me nothing ever happened that summer, that everything I was worried about was in my head. I never responded to Mr. Langston. I didn't know what I'd even say. Thanks for confirming a hole in my memory. Thanks for telling me my sister's terror was real after all. There was nothing to say. Just another piece of the puzzle I didn't know how to place. After that, I stopped searching. Not because I had answers, but because I finally accepted that I'd never get the kind I wanted. I wasn't going to find a file labeled truth, or a recording, or a signed confession. The truth was scattered in fragments. Old emails, someone's hesitation on the phone, a slip of a memory that didn't fit the rest. I wasn't solving a mystery. I was excavating a grave I'd been told never existed. That changes a person. I started writing again, not just journaling but essays, pieces, trying to shape something out of the mess. I submitted one anonymously to an online magazine under the title Inherited Silence. They published it. It didn't have names, dates, or locations, just the feeling. The tension of growing up in a house where everything looked perfect from the outside and everything rotted just beneath the floorboards. The response surprised me. Emails, dozens. Some said, "I think you're telling my story." Others shared things they'd never said out loud: abuse, complicity, siblings who turned into shadows. And one email from a burner account simply said, "You're not the only one who remembers." That one kept me up, still does. Because there's always been this quiet suspicion that it wasn't just my family, that maybe what happened at that cabin wasn't isolated, that maybe that hatch wasn't built just for us. I haven't seen Haley since the letter. I don't expect to. Part of me believes she's still watching, waiting, not with malice, just caution. The kind of caution you learn when you've seen what happens to people who speak too much. I think about her often. I wonder if she ever wakes up with that same feeling I do, that something is missing, misfiled, broken, or if she's finally convinced herself none of it ever happened. I don't blame her anymore. I used to sit in dark rooms and replay every word she ever turned against me, every look she gave them after betraying me. But now I just feel sad, because she didn't win anything. She just bought herself silence. And silence, I've learned, is expensive. I've kept the photo of the hatch. I still have the journal, the letter, the screenshots. I don't show them to anyone, not because I'm hiding, but because I know now most people don't want the truth. They want a clean story, a villain, a victim, a twist. What I have isn't that. What I have is a long, slow unraveling of a life that looked fine from the outside, and the quiet certainty that I was right to stop trying to save someone who never wanted saving. Or maybe she did. Maybe she just wanted to be saved in a way that didn't require her to admit what really happened. That's the part I'll never know. And maybe that's the real ending. Not a reveal, not a confrontation. Just that final understanding that some people escape by forgetting and others survive by remembering everything. I still live quietly, new city, new job. A few people who know pieces of the story but not the whole. Sometimes I catch myself glancing over my shoulder when a car drives too slowly past my street. Or I double-check the lock twice. It's not fear exactly, it's muscle memory. The body remembers what the mind can't always carry. I tell myself I'm okay. Most days I believe it. But sometimes I hear a voice in a dream, not hers. His, calm, patient, saying the thing he used to say when we were kids whenever we asked too many questions. Some things are better left buried. He was wrong, but I understand now why he said it. Because once you start digging, you don't get to choose what comes up with the dirt. And some things, once seen, can never be unseen. I keep the lights on at night now, not because I think he'll come back, but because I know what it feels like to live in the dark, and I refuse to go back.